So before even, importing this house model, let's do one thing. Remember the thing about the size testing? You want to make sure that, I think this one to me has exceeded the sizes of 30K millimeter. So let's go here, copy that. I'm going to do really dumb size testing. And let's go to style. So this is like the biggest you can do, right? And just clear understand this. This is a rule of thumb. The reason I've tested before we can bring this model alright because the 30 millimeter tubes, 3000 millimeter tubes apply to one edge of the surface, which in our case, if you go to the top view, if you measure this, we don't have any edges that's longer than this, even though combined we have the entire house model, which is slightly over, right? But we don't have any single continuous edge that's exceeding this limit. For example, for this one, you wouldn't be able to do it because this edge already exceeds the limit. So hope that makes sense. So after testing, I was like, okay, this model is good to go, right? Oh, it's not. And then let's do some cleanups. Let's first delete the landscape elements. And I would also recommend deleting the furnitures as well. So, because you can always import and change the materials of the furnitures. And once you are, inside the Coohom. So I'll delete all those furnitures. And same thing as those current too. So after a round of this cleanup, I'm going to show you what would happen if you bring the entire model into the Coohom without separating it. All right. I already deleted everything, and let's hide the roof. I just hide it before, and check if there's any other irregular stuff in there. And I check how many materials inside the model. So this shows how many materials IDs are there, and this also shows when you import it in Coohom, that Coohom will recognize there's so many materials in there that the Coohom can replace with its own texture. So what we want to do is do regular cleanup, go to the model information. You always want to purge on use. And this will save you a lot of time, like honestly. So see, we are down to like 9 materials. This is what we want to get with imported Coohom. And I'm going to save it as with roof, okay? And we can upload it now. So this is the one that we just worked at. It's open. So for all the house models, still, I'm recommend just put in a furniture catalog to treat it as a furniture. So one thing to be noticed that when you have like a painting, a wall hosted element, it will not recognize the imported house model, the walls inside the house models as a wall element, because the entire model is considered as a furniture, right? We don't currently have that catalog yet. And you want to choose floor furnitures since the house is going to be on the ground. So let's submit the model, continue to upload, and let's go to our projects. Let's view projects. So let's just enter it. So we have a ceiling of this room. I think from the previous tutorial, if you want a room that does not have ceiling, you just need to change the name of the room to a terrace. And then I'm going to show you guys what would happen if I just bring in the house model in directly. So this is a house model with roof, right? Great, let's just bring it in. You're like, whoa, what has happened? This happened because the model Coohom are looking at it as a furniture, so it's looking for a place to snap to. And when your room is really small, it does this. So let's go back. Yet. So we want to make sure that the room is big enough to accommodate this model first. Okay, let's make it bigger. I think what was the dimension before? It was 30K. So I do 35. And let's do this way. Let's just drag it up a little bit. And then you can place your model there, right? Let's go back to 3D view. And this is your model. And there's another thing we can do is also we make this wall as a dwarf wall. Just like that. This is some of the standard practices we have. Dwarf walls. So you can change the height to like 1 millimeter. That you don't even see it. Go ahead to 3D view, and this is our import. The one thing about this import, you see there is a face missing, is because you have a backwarded face inside SketchUp. For those who are not familiar with the concept of the the front and the back face of a surface in SketchUp, I'm gonna do a really quick twist, and you can see it. So if I were to go back to here, the style, to go to editing, this shows what the back colors are like of the surface. So if it changes colors to something much more visible, and let's switch to the style, and you will see, oh, this surface is actually backwards. And let's go back to here and look at a Coohom. Yeah, Coohom also knows it is a backward surfaces. So this is why it's causing some of the missing surfaces display inside of Coohom. But no worries, this will still render. I believe this still render, but it will just cause visual confusions when we're actually working within the model. Okay. Another thing that I think the best practice is for bringing the house model, which I didn't demo here, is you usually want to separate the roof and the ceiling. So here's why. If you go back to the plan view, you see where you like to put in furniture, but you can't because you can't look into it because it's already being imported as a whole. So the only thing you have to add the furniture's inside space is to actually go in the space and drop furnitures like here, right? So go back to the front and back surfaces and how do you fix it? So after you set your back color, right, and you saw it, it's like, okay, this is backward, this looks weird. It's very simple. You just right click and reverse surface. So when you see a model, you want a model to have 0 back surfaces outward. Like here, this is also a back surface as well, and the bottom too, and also this too is kind of missing. So that's why it explains when you look at a Coohom, it felt like, oh, this area looks a little bit weird because it's not showing that volume metrics, the roof here. It is because of the same reason. It's just backward. Okay. So I'm gonna save you guys a little bit of time here. I'm not gonna go through this because I already have a separated model, which I'm going to show you. So what I did here is I've actually created this model that has no ceiling, and I imported it. Okay, so let's try how this would look different. Let me try. Delete, and then let's drag this model. Just go to plan view, so it's a bit easier back into it. And go to the 3D view. And for the roof model, let me just show you. This is entirely its own ceiling. So the trick is, if I go to the front view, right? If I draw a surface here, this is the ground. See, backward surface again. So this is the front surface and back surface. If I go to the front view, you'll see this roof, I did not touch it. I leave it right where it adds its own model. So we'll go back to the model with ceiling. You see that I leave it right where they are. So this is going to be really helpful when you bring the model, because the model will kind of stay where exactly they were in the SketchUp model in the spatial relationship to its own, the bottom part of the house. Since I have separated those two, and in here I've also brought in is as a ceiling elements, right? So I have the ceiling floor, we have the floor elements, and what I did is I play with different type of settings. So so far the settings I find there's both way. You can import it as a ceiling. So let's see, this is the element I just imported, and this is categorized as ceiling as I named it, and just drag it in. And this was actually caused a problem. I wasn't able to, I was only able to adjust it that much from the space. I got confused at first, but I realized because everything has a room height. And also the reason when you import it as a ceiling element is you would only be able to see it in the ceiling view, sometimes even not. This is something I discovered too, and you were able to see it in the ceiling plan. So let's just drag it over. And let's go back to the room height issue. So this height was actually determined by the room height. And I want to illustrate something real quick, which is the room height should actually be the height to the bottom of the ceiling pieces. What do I mean by that is, if I were to do a quick illustration, see, this is the bottom of your ceiling, and then and this is the ground. You really want your room height to be set with this and plus the height of the ceiling. So this is your room height. Because when you imported the ceiling element, is in Coohom, it automatically recognizes that this is the ceiling that attached to of your room height. So if you have the dimension here, the height of the ceiling, and you have your room height, that's the two dimension you will need to actually import and have perfectly snapped ceiling that you don't have to worry about and fiddling around inside Coohom. So let's do that. So I'm going to do a really quick measurement. So in here, the height is actually 50, it's 51 to be exact, right? So that's 510 millimeters. And if we go back to measuring this entire thing, And this is 501, so this is 500 how is that? 5,010 millimeters. Sorry, millimeters messed me up, and then I used to working in this. So after I explain this, let's go back to our Coohom, and let's set the room height. Let's go to our floor plan. Go to the room. So this is where we want a room height. We want a room height at 50 and 10 millimeters. And I go to our ceilings. We drag this thing all the way to the floor. And you'll see the maximum you can get is 4,500. Why is that? It is because the entire ceiling, the thickness of the ceiling added to, which is H1 here, added to, subtracted to the room height here is 4,500. In this way, you know that you get the perfect ceiling height in there. Okay, let's just go back to the view. And what's nice about this workflow is you go back to the floor plan view. It's like, oh, whoa, I can start placing furniture here. And then this chair, see, is snapping to the surface here. And it will be exact because this is another benefit of using Coohom's stock models is it automatically snaps to the surfaces below. Right? This is what it looks like when you actually import it in, when you separate the roof, because it just gives you so much flexibilities that you can placing models on the plan views without actually hiding the roof, right? So with no further ado, I want to also want to show you guys. Let me just go back. Actually, I already did some pre-renderings to show you guys the differences. So this is when I start to bring the model and start rendering it. And then slowly, this is when I actually added roof. So see, I didn't get a perfect roof because I didn't know it was the room issue that's causing that. So after I fix that, what you're going to get is actually something rendered like this. Enter the tool, and then you go to the material editor. And you're like, see, this entire surface is considered to be glass. And to be really honest, you can apply anything. You can apply like a texture to it. And Coohom will be like, okay, let's do it. And then the entire thing will be texture. So after changing this, you see it still reads the transparency, reflection and refraction from SketchUp. But if I once I switch to the Coohom material, it just looks so much better after I down to the class. And I want to show you, I can also change the materials on the floor. Right, I already changed the floor on the floor, and if you didn't know, if you noticed, I also changed the materials that are in the wood cabinetries inside. And after filling with that, I was like, okay, also in this one, I also changed the materials on this roof elements just to be powder coated paint. That makes a subtle differences that are starting to grow your design from SketchUp into Coohom. And if you look into it, you can start to see like details of those painted and textures. And then this is an interior view, which you see some of the reflection here. But in this session, we won't cover too much of the interior view that renders in this. But I do want to show you guys how I did the lightings in this. How do you get the sunlight? It's through the custom lighting setting lights. So what you want to do is do customize, and you pick a lighting template, say an outdoor reality daylight. Okay. So here, if you go back to the 2D plan and go to sunlight, you see the sunlight is default like turned off. If you turn on the sunlight, this is when you start to play around. This is actually the fun stuff. So if I change the sunlight orientation, you see a very different render result, because it's the sunrise light, it's gonna cast very different shadows. I'm going to save real quick, and I'm going to render. So you guys see this is actually going to render one in 4K because Coohom just really fast with those 4K renderings. And yes, and then when actually a little bit, I'm going to show you if you want to make things look a little bit lighter. What I usually do is there's two ways, but I do like the rectangular light, and drag and drop. I'm going to show you what a difference does it make when you actually do that. So a lot of time you don't have to cover an entire space, but like if you just do a little narrower tips, and you see the lighting actually have its limit, which is really common in rendering plugins, because the ways it calculates lighting, it cannot give you a lighting at an infinite length. So this is the limits we have. So after I put in this light, and I'm gonna put another one here, and then I didn't touch any brightness setting here, and let's say save, and we'll do the same view and see how that affected the interior space. Okay, so I'm gonna do 4K. Maybe do HD here. Let's see different qualities. So if you look at this one, the lighting and the shadowing, it is so much more different than this one. So this will be ready pretty soon. Let's see if we can have like, so you see that there is like a white lighting showing here. This looks a bit unnatural here because you have to play with the temperature of the lights and the lighting intensity setting. But that will be an entire another session. But I think for this Coohom Live, we really want to just cover the workflow between the SketchUp model and then all the tips that we just covered. Clean up your model, make sure that the materials are as clean as possible, and also there's no backward faces, which is the tricks I show you here, which is using the backward color changes to something that's very obvious. You can see backward colors everywhere. This is backward. This is backward. So and then also use the material ID smartly to assign materials in SketchUp and apply the materials in Coohom. And the last tip would be, to summarize, is to separate import. You import your roof and your house model separately, and once you import your roof, change your room height. And remember this diagram. You gotta calculate room height and measure that. I know it sounds a little bit daunting, but down the road, it will save you a lot of time trying to figure out what has happened and tweaking the height. And think that is pretty much what we have covered today. Yep. Okay, thank you.